Hi, I'm a little later than usual. Today is a little bit of an hectic day, but I wanted to continue our regular appointment with live meetings on Tuesday and Thursday. And today I would like to talk about something that I discussed this morning with a potential client. In the context of considering a migration, we were looking at the role of the runtime. And, at the first glance, when we are translating an application, we are translating some code written in some language, which is using some libraries. Part of it is the standard library, but other libraries could be libraries developed by the client or from third parties. And when we migrate these to a new system, at the first glance, we would like to translate every element on the original code in a corresponding transpiled element, while mapping all the libraries we are using to other libraries that either we get from somewhere, or we build ourselves, or we use functionality from the standard library of the target system. For example, if I have in my original code a way to print on the screen, and maybe this is done by calling some function from the standard library, and I'm translating to, let's say, Java, I may use system out println, so a functionality that comes from the standard library of Java. So sometimes there is this simple and clear mapping, but that is often the case that we need to do some adjustment, because it could either be that the original language has some extra functionality that are not present in the target language, and therefore we replace them by creating some sort of runtime providing these functionalities. For example, certain languages have print as a statement, as a keyword, while others don't have it, but they use some functionality from the standard library for that. So it could go in the two directions. Sometimes we have in the original language some feature we don't have in the target language, so we use the runtime to emulate the functionality of providing an alternative way to obtain the same result. In other cases, it's the vice versa. In the original language, we were relying on some standard library, but for that same thing, we have that supporting the target language, and so we need to adapt. But we also need sometimes to adapt because of some mismatches that there are, either because the original language used some execution model, maybe it's procedural, maybe it's functional, maybe it's declarative, that is not a perfect fit for the target language. And so to smooth out the migration, we create a runtime to facilitate this migration. In other cases, well, maybe the original system and target system have different capabilities, and so we fill the gap by creating a runtime that can provide some of these functionalities. Of course, some limit. If the original system has very complex logic, maybe, if the target system has not those features at all, maybe the target of the migration is not a good fit. But assuming it is, then sometimes in the transpiler, we also we may decide to do more work on the transpiler or on the runtime. Sometimes we can create a more advanced runtime, and so having transformation that are simpler. So in a way, the line is not so fixed. There is some room to adapt and to move the work on one side or on the other in order to facilitate the work of transpiling, in order to providing more maintainable code. So there is some wiggle room, and this is, I think, where expertise helps, because you can decide where to move things, and it's not there is not a strict rule, while typically what you can express through a construct, you want to express with a construct, what you express through a library, you want to express to a library, you can actually adapt and change that to compensate for misalignment between the capabilities of the original system and the target system. Maybe a little more abstract, but I didn't want to share the very specific reference to this discussion, but I hope it makes sense anyway. And of course, if you have comments, questions, doubts, I'm always very happy if you reach out here in comments or send me a message or whatever. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Bye.